close of the semester, we're actually going to consider everything we've examined in prior weeks and integrate that into the concept of let's build a culture of health. Let's make our society and our world one where health comes first, our physical health with our mental health attached to that, so that we can improve the condition for all people. So this is again much more a macro approach, but also identify some things we can do with individual clients and families to help on a micro level. I think the reality here is our social work theory, our social work evidence that we're generating, our professional focus has really been limited, if not barren, like some of the food deserts we've talked about, in the area of promoting healthy behaviors through education and interventions for our clients and our communities. It's just not something our profession has focused on. Again, we talk about coming from a strengths perspective, and when we go to other countries, it's interesting because they don't see that as that's a very much a Western focus. It's not a focus in other areas. But when we look at that, we talk about identifying that strength within that individual, and then that individual using that strength to overcome their challenges. However, I want to flip that. I want to talk about these challenges that are being placed in front of us that may or may not be within our individual control if we don't collectively come together. And I think our physical health is one of those areas, because we've already talked about vulnerable populations who don't have access to healthy food, don't have access to safe places for physical activity, don't have access to the health care that they need. So that whatever their strengths are individually, that's great, and we can certainly build upon those, but we have to come at this from a social justice perspective in order to really turn this culture of health into a reality. So things like physical activity, healthy eating, smoking cessation and alcohol consumption cessation, preventive medicine, and environment preservation. These are all areas, I'm going to say with the exception of probably alcohol cessation, because we will roll that into our drug treatment. But what I'm going to talk about is not the individual who has become so dysfunctional that they can't maintain employment, they can't maintain relationships, they're having problems with the law. I'm going to talk about those of us on a daily basis from a mental health perspective, a modern mental health perspective, that wow, when we get home in the afternoon, we're just exhausted and we need to reach for that glass of wine to unwind. That's a buffering, and the alcohol has an impact on our physical health, even when we're not drinking to excess. So with the others in this list here, I don't think as social workers, we actually address these. We don't actually collaborate with anybody from other professions about these areas. We don't become educated ourselves, and I'm going to challenge each one of us because very few of us incorporate these into our lifestyle. And if we're not incorporating these things into our lifestyle, how are we going to model that for our clients? So really, the culture of health does begin with us. And first of all, let's take physical activity. Physical activity is a very simple, straightforward action that we can have our clients engage in that will have numerous effects on their physical health, on their mental health, on their outlook. You don't have to look very far to see the evidence for this. You don't have to be a trainer. You don't have to be an athletic trainer. You don't have to be specialized in any type of certificate about physical activity just to advise your clients to get moving. So we know that being physically active will reduce the risk of dying from coronary heart disease and of developing high blood pressure, colon cancer, and diabetes. It's documented. We know it can help to reduce our blood pressure in some people. We know it helps to maintain healthy bones, muscles, and joints, especially for women as we're entering into the era of menopause and our hormonal makeup is changing, and then we're going to become more Subjected to osteoporosis, weight-bearing activities is vital. It also reduces symptoms of anxiety and depression. It fosters improvement in mood, feelings of well-being, helps control weight, develop lean muscle, reduce body fat, just physical activity. This can be as little as walking 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week. You can get benefits from this. That doesn't take a highly qualified clinician to encourage their clients to become physically active. It can mean just not being in the chair, not being sedentary, getting up and walking around the house if that's what it needs to be. So what I'm saying here is we can educate our clients. We can access resources. We can help develop resources for them. We can build this into our treatment plans, even when it seems really obscure and not related to the direct problem, because it will help all the way around. So this is an easy one that we are totally absent from in our profession. There's a few individuals now who hold social work license that are going on and getting some certificates as life coaches, and may include some physical activity in that, or maybe even some personal training. But excuse me, but this is something we should be doing with all of our clients. We should be educating all of our clients that just a simple 30-minute moderate level walk 3 to 5 times a week will have such a positive impact on health. It doesn't you don't have to go out and run a marathon or a half marathon or whatever you think. But just moving our bodies. Our bodies were made to move. They were not made to be sedentary, riding hours and hours in a car to go back and forth to work, or sitting hours and hours in front of a computer. That's not how our bodies were made. Our bodies need physical activity to maintain optimum health and ward off a lot of disease. There is a psychologist in the Sherman area, Dr. Cherry Cunningham, and when you sign up to become her client, you sign a contract that says you will engage in some fitness routine. And she'll develop that with you, but she will not see her clients. She will not see a client that does not agree to engage in physical activity as part of their treatment. And I think that's just awesome. Actually, I mean, I don't want to certainly deny clients interventions, but we got to be all in. And again, it starts with us. It starts with us. And as you're a student and you're sitting in front of the computer for hours, and we've been locked down because of COVID, all of these things, now is the time for us to really say, what can we do to get moving? We have got to get moving in this country to begin this culture of health. So what we can do is we can work with communities to provide the environmental inducements for physical activity, such as safe, accessible, attractive trails for walking or bicycling, sidewalks that have curb cuts in them so that individuals can get on and off the sidewalks. Opening of schools for community recreation from neighborhood watch groups to increase the safety, encourage malls, other indoor protected locations to provide safe places for walking. We can do it. In some areas, it's going to be a little more challenging than others, but it doesn't mean it can't be done, and it doesn't mean that the benefits will not begin rolling in eventually. So I highly encourage that. I will self-disclose. I have, for 8 years now, I've been working out in a program called P31. It's for women only. We actually work out at 5 o'clock in the morning in the parking lot. It's actually a tough workout for women, specifically for women. There are opportunities all over the state of Texas, and there are opportunities in other states now for participating in P31. You can look up P31 Fitness. It is a wonderful, wonderful way to get healthy, to maintain fellowship. It does have a spiritual focus, but not real heavy, if that can be a turnoff for you. And then in addition to the P31, I'm a runner. I actually didn't start running until I think it was 52. At 52, I started running and ran my first 5K. Since that time, I've ran 10 half marathons in 4 different states. And I figured it up something like almost 500 miles in timed runs. So I know the benefits and the effects of physical activity. I've seen it in myself, so I can actually support that. I know how important it is. I know how important it is for my mental health. I also know that I turned 59 this year. I have no cholesterol problems. I have no blood pressure problems. I take no medications. I do my annual checkups because our insurance requires it, but my doctor says, everything's good. So I can attest to the importance of this for mental and physical health, and just highly believe we should really encourage our clients to get moving, get their butts out of those seats and get moving. Similar to what P31 does, but we can develop some community-based programs that may meet the needs of specific populations. Maybe they're unique to minority groups, women, again, P31, older adults. There are some programs that are targeted at older adults. I think AARP may have information on that. People with disabilities and low-income groups. Again, talk routinely to your clients about incorporating physical activity in their lives. It can truly make a big difference. And this is just a small step that we can take that really doesn't change the course of what we're doing, but can reap tremendous benefits and begin to establish that culture of health. You can encourage the employers to provide supportive worksite environments and policies that offer the opportunities for employees to become physically healthy. And what we need to do is we need to generate the evidence. In social work, everybody hates the research, but we've got to generate the evidence to demonstrate to our clients, those who are funding us, and our policymakers that the positive impact that this can have for our vulnerable population. And then we need to go after the resources and invest them. Eating healthy. And this is one that is, again, a very complex topic, so I'm breaking it down in just a few highly visible areas. Eating healthy, we do not eat healthy in the United States, period. We do not eat healthy in the United States. We've already talked about lack of access to healthy foods for some of our vulnerable populations, but there's also a huge capitalistic perspective in terms of the food industry and the marketing that they use to promote unhealthy but highly profitable foods. This book right here is a really good book, The Unhealthy Truth, and the particular author of this, she was working in finance. If I'm not mistaken, she was working in finance, and then she became assigned to the food industry, and when she got to doing the analysis for her job in terms of the finance, there were some pretty startling things that she saw in terms of how the money that they generated from the food that they were producing and how that food supply chain worked against the health of the United States. So it's a good book. She also does offer suggestions because, again, you can't, just like taking up physical activity, most of us in our lives are not going to wake up one morning and go, okay, I'm going to only eat raw, I'm going to eat Mediterranean, and then bam, just start. There's so many influences and impacts that we have to take it one small step at a time. But if you take it one small step at a time, you can get there. Our processed foods and the preservatives and the chemicals that are in it, the toxins, really have some direct links to allergies, ADHD, cancer, asthma among children. We're now seeing links between sugar and dementia and Alzheimer's. These are unnatural substances that we're placing into our body when our body was designed to use natural substances for food. So our food should be to fuel our body. That it's just like putting gas and oil in your car. That is to fuel your car to be healthy, to get you from one place to the other. That's all our food should be. Our food should be nothing but fueling our body in a healthy way. And our body is made to take natural substances, whole substances. and use those for that fuel. But the way our food industry has developed, and in terms of the processed foods that we have, we are now putting toxins into our body and changing the makeup of our metabolisms and the way our body consumes food and the way our brain reacts to it. And so we're seeing this big link between the food that we're putting in our body and these negative health outcomes. One of the biggest areas that's really been in the spotlight lately has been the sugar area. And if you have not done it, I will challenge you, when you go grocery shopping, I want you to look at the label of everything that you buy, whether it be tomato soup, whether it be something that you believe is healthy, some of the yogurts, all of that. Look at the added sugars and the amount of added sugar, and then look for those sneaky added sugars in there, like the fructose and the rice sugars and all of those. Anything that's added, any sugar or chemical that is added, that is not a natural source of sugar, which sugar is a good carbohydrate if it's a natural source. And because it comes with, if you eat that apple whole, you get the fiber and you get the antioxidants and you get it. There is some natural sugar in it, but it's the processed sugars that I'm talking about in this. And the sugar industry is like one of the major industries around the world. And the most recent numbers I found here were it exceeds 180 million metric tons annually, with Brazil dominating in the market, but the United States ranking in the top producers of sugar. What is also evolved in the last several years is there's been some evidence that back when we were taught that cholesterol was linked to fatty foods, high fats, all of a sudden it wasn't cool to eat eggs, and because of the cholesterol in it and all of that. Well, there's been evidence that surfaced that during the research processes, the sugar industry paid some scientists to point the blame at fat and away from sugar. So research does have some culpability in this, and I've delved into some of those studies, not many of them because it's pretty time consuming, but if you can find them, a lot of them were shelved and not fully published. But now that it's come out, some of them are available. So we know, but what we know from the bottom line here is the food industry and the marketing industry manipulate information. They manipulate information to sell a product. That's just they have to make money. That's what it's about. So they manipulate this information. And what's happened is the awareness that sugar is permeating everything we have. Every processed food we have has some form of processed sugar in it. And that's just pretty scary when we now know the detrimental effects that sugar can have. In one study, it demonstrated that the U.S. population still consumes, even with this awareness, we're still consuming today almost 300% times the recommended daily amount of added sugar. And when I say added sugar, that includes everything in what you're buying, not just the sugar you're spooning on top of your cereal or the sugar you're putting in your iced tea on your own. That's in addition to the sugars that come in that processed food. Okay, so added sugar and artificial sweeteners increase diabetes risk. There's evidence that this high carb diet and the high blood sugar are associated with cognitive decline. We know they're linked to a variety of cancers, heart disease, obesity, all of those areas that we talked about in earlier weeks that impact us from chronic health conditions. This processed sugar is contributing to that. So why is processed sugar just the evil thing? Well, number one, it's not a natural source of energy for our bodies. It is a human-produced source of energy for our bodies. Yes, the sugar cane grows out in the field, but you're not picking that sugar cane out of the field and chewing it to get the sugar out of it. Plus, those sugar canes that are growing in the field have been treated, and they've been treated with pesticides, and they've been treated with all kinds of growth enhancing products. So even if you were to go out into somebody's sugarcane field and get the natural sugarcane, it still may have some processing to it. Unless you grow it yourself and you know that there's been nothing added to it and then you chew it, it's not natural. So the human components of creating these processed sugars is what we're having problems with. Sugar it's highly palatable. Oh my gosh, it triggers that reward system because it's sweet. So somebody out there knows behavioral wise that this sugar is triggering these reward systems in our brain. And if you look at your marketing and if you look at your advertising, you're going to see how they play on that. If we take it in excess, that sugar triggers that reward system and it can induce compulsive eating because it also separates from and doesn't trigger the caloric intake system to say that, okay, I've had enough. So that's part of the problem. So added fructose can be especially disruptive. Again, because it's not an immediate energy source for the brain. So the brain's not saying, okay, I've had enough, but we get this sweet, so we get this dysregulation of eating behavior. And it's evolving, and research is showing that it does parallel the compulsive consumption of drug addiction. Now you can actually find some statements that may not be supported by research yet that what sugar does to the brain, makes it look like it's the Alzheimer's brain and things like that. Those are areas that are still being investigated, but most of that research has been done in the laboratory with rats. But we do know that sugar has been linked to some very serious illnesses. The other area that we deal with or don't deal with, smoking and alcohol cessation. Okay, so smoking is obvious. We know, and it's highly publicized, that smoking is dangerous. It causes lung cancer. It causes secondary lung cancers to individuals who are around those who smoke, even if that individual doesn't smoke. It causes asthma, heart disease. It affects the quality of the environment and the air that we breathe. We know that, and we still smoke. So we still have to continue to work with our clients and ourselves to get rid of this smoking, get smoking out of here. The tobacco industry is still a very large industry, and the smoking industry. Now we have the vaping. There's very little research at this point that indicates how vaping is going to impact it. But again, if we're putting chemicals into our body that is not a natural source for our body to use, we're poisoning it. I don't care whether you're vaping or whether you're smoking a Marlboro or you're putting something into your body that your body does not need as fuel. Therefore, you are poisoning it. And so the vaping, and now we have the movement towards the legalization of marijuana. And we do know that, again, in the processing of marijuana, just like in the processing of tobacco, unless you're growing it on your own, there's going to be some processing there, and there can be some chemicals involved in that. So again, these are not fuel for our body. These are for human pleasure, and we're putting them into our body. So because they're not meant for that to be, they're going to have detrimental effects, okay? When we talk about alcohol, we tend to roll alcohol in with substance abuse, and so we have the DSM-5 diagnosis, all that kind of stuff. And we tend to think about the individual who has reached a point in their life where they're not able to function. They may have legal problems, they have relationship problems, employment problems, and it's tied back to their use of alcohol. But what I want to challenge you is those individuals are obvious. But there's a whole lot of individuals out there that are not so obvious that we may see in our client load but don't address it. And those are the overdrinkers. And the overdrinkers don't fully develop this dysfunctional, obvious problem in their lifestyle, but they use the drinking as a buffer. It's very easy to say, oh, I've had such a hard day. I'm going to go home. I need a couple of glasses of wine. I need to rewind. But you know what? That's buffering. And again, that's using alcohol to not feel our feelings about the day that we had and not process those feelings. So this ties back to our modern mental health. for the average individual, again, I'm not talking about those individuals who have the extreme addictions. I'm talking the average individual out there. And when we take that alcohol into our body, it has detrimental effects. There's still some controversial research about red wine acting as kind of a blood thinner and having some positive effects on the heart. But what doctors will tell you is don't start drinking red wine if you don't drink, because it doesn't have that big of a benefit. So what I'm talking about is having conversations with our clients about the over drinking. Maybe it's just going out once a month with the girls and having a good time and drinking too much, or something like that. But there's reasons for over drinking. Again, we're putting alcohol into our body as a pleasure, for pleasurable purposes, and it's not fuel for our body. So therefore, there's some negative outcomes to it. And alcohol does cause problems with our body, and especially for females. And when we're talking about the interactions with the hormonal aspects, not a lot of research has been done for nutrition, alcohol, those things, and the relationship between the different hormonal aspects. Remember, we talked earlier about most research is based on the white male. Well, in the white female, we just don't have real in-depth information in terms of how this just over drinking interferes with our hormonal output, and then that in turn can interfere with the homeostasis of our body. So in this area, these are obvious things, smoking and alcohol, but I want you to think beyond simply those who are in treatment for these identified areas. I want you to think about your clients who may just have some over drinking problems. Just occasionally they drink too much, or maybe they just drink 2 or 3 glasses of wine every night, but they don't have detrimental effects from it in terms of their lifestyle and their life functioning. But there's underlying detrimental effects that can be happening for their health reasons. Alcohol also impacts your ability to sleep. We know how important sleep is. And if you're drinking alcohol at night, it oftentimes prevents you from going into the REM sleep. And if you don't have your REM sleep, your brain is not cleaning out all the toxins that have been captured there during the day. So if you're drinking just a few glasses of wine to go to sleep, you're actually doing the opposite of what you need to do. So we need to become more educated about this, and then be more proactive in educating our clients about the detrimental effects of these. And of course, we've talked about preventive medicine, and access to preventive medicine is vital. It's vital to maintaining a culture of health. Preventive medicine includes those wellness checkups, includes the vaccinations, includes early identification of problems, includes intervention for those early identification of problems. So we need a preventive approach instead of a reactive approach. I think in our country, we tend to think, I'm going to enjoy this lifestyle, and I'm having a good time, and I'm gaining a few pounds here and there, and I'm doing this. And then I go to the doctor and I want it fixed. And I want a pill to fix it, because that's what Western medicine tends to promote, is pharmacological type of interventions instead of behavioral type of interventions. So we need that preventive medicine, and preventive medicine includes fair access for everybody to preventive health care. It includes ongoing education. It includes ongoing acceptance of what we need to do individually in terms of our eating and our physical activity, and not putting toxins into our body. So this needs to be a holistic perspective in order to create this culture of health. And one area I know we don't talk about is environmental impact. And we can actually see, it's so obvious throughout the world in terms of what's happening with our mother planet and Mother Earth, and the impact that has directly on our clients. And you can actually see, there's the Flint, Michigan issue with the lead in the water. If you go into some areas where Native American reservations, if you talk about where landfills are going to be placed, they're placed in lower socioeconomic areas because they don't have the political advocacy to keep them out. So those are just some very close to home things. But then we talk about using pesticides. We talk about using the plastics. We talk about all the trash that we generate. This is having impacts on our health. So, again, what can we do on an individual basis to reduce our carbon footprint? One thing I do, I pretty much almost always hang my clothes out to dry. We have a washer and dryer, obviously, but I really stopped using my dryer for on a regular basis many, many years ago. And it happened because we had a surge in electricity costs. But I had my husband build me this wonderful clothesline, and we love the fact that our sheets smell like the outdoors. And so I still hang my clothes out to dry. Obviously, if the weather's not good, I can't do that, but it does help to reduce some of the environmental impact. I don't use dryer sheets because dryer sheets cause trash. When you get through with the dryer sheet, you throw it in the trash. And I learned from AARP, I take my softener, my fabric softener, and I dilute it with water, and I have a bowl of it, and I keep a sponge, and I drop that sponge into that fabric softener, and then if I dry my clothes, when I pop them in the dryer, I put that in there, and then therefore I have the fabric softener without the waste, the trash waste. So it may seem like small things, but it's important things to me, and I think that we need to actually demonstrate and model to our clients ways that we can have a better environmental impact. Planting flowers. There's actually some evidence now that certain houseplants, when you keep certain houseplants in your house, and it's like you need about 6 houseplants per person, but there's certain houseplants that will actually help remove toxins from the air and the environment. So it's not all woo-woo, foo-foo stuff. This is real stuff that can be done, but we also need to take a stronger impact, a stronger stance for environmental impact, environmental social justice, and help our clients, our vulnerable populations through that. And in that realm, there's 12 grand challenges from the social work profession that was put out by the American Academy of Social Work, Social Welfare. And in that, we have a grand challenge to close the health gap, which is primarily what we're talking about with our vulnerable populations, but also to create social responses to changing environment. And that environment means Mother Earth. It means the physical planet, not the environments that we typically talk about in the ecosystems, but it means also including the physical planet and how we can take steps to change our approach to managing the physical planet to benefit people. Again, some of the very popular examples in our society is the Flint, Michigan debacle with the lead in the water and how that's devastated that community and still continues to do so. When we look at the massive hurricanes that we're having, and if we look at Hurricane Harvey, Houston still has not recovered from that. There are still massive amounts of houses that are rotting, and you've got mold and you've got toxins and you have all of that. So we have to take this larger global picture. We need to take the smaller steps, obviously, but we also have to take a larger global picture to create this culture of health. And I hope that by taking this class, everybody takes away a little something with it that they can then incorporate into their future practices as well as into their future lives.